So for everyone, welcome, and Jeff, welcome for the rental roundtable. You are our eighth guest. Thanks for joining today.
Thanks for having me.
So it's fun to talk to a local Atlanta business person. We're probably about 5 minutes from each other. Probably could have done this in person if we had a better, podcast studio or something. But it's good to be here. You're Atlanta based. I'm Atlanta based. Really excited to talk to you today. Just so for the audience, this can be interactive. So as you have questions throughout hand, just feel free to chat in questions. I'll ask those to Jeff as we go through. But we've got four main topics to talk about today. I'm excited to get into that. But first of all, Jeff, I know you've been president of Northside Tool Rental, I think 4 locations for over 30 years, if I'm correct. Love to just hear how you first got into the rental industry and some of your journey of how you've gotten to where you are today.
Sure. It's a family-owned business. Grandfather started it in 1953 after World War II, and he had traveled to California and seen some rental stores and thought that's a pretty cool idea. And he just spent decades grinding it out and building it. As a family member, I did what a lot of family-owned businesses do, and I worked in the nuts and bolts of the business in the back of the shop and all that stuff through high school and college and things like that. Graduated from Georgia Tech in 90. Got an MBA from University of Georgia in 93, started here full-time around 94, took over the business full-time as president in 2000, and I run it with my brother, Stefan, and a gentleman named Andy Shields, who's on our leadership team. And Stefan and I have been running it since 2000. Andy's been on board about 6 years with us.
So I got to ask, are you Georgia or Georgia Tech fan? Or you go for both?
I'm a diehard Tech fan, third generation. Both father and grandfather went there. However, I do like Georgia, and I'll pull for them as long as they're not playing Tech.
Yeah, well, it's a good time to be a Georgia fan, more so.
It's been a great time to be a Georgia fan.
Georgia Tech had their run in the early 90s, I think, and they've had teams, but Georgia's a good time to be a fan. By the way, we've talked to other people who've come on about working with family and the pros and cons of that. How's it been working with your brother? How long have you guys been doing this together?
Well, we've been both in the business full time since the mid 90s, and we've been side by side running it since 2000. And we have, what I have come to understand over the years is a pretty unusual situation where we work just very, very well together, very open with each other. We have very similar thoughts about where we're trying to go. We do understand which one of us has which skills, and we let we kind of take the business and split it up some. But we communicate a lot, and there's not a lot of ego. We both know what we're trying to do and trying to get in the same place. So we have a really, really strong teamwork for sure.
Yeah, that's not normal. Family work together that long. And what do you think the keys been? Has it just been the open transparency, being able to talk through things directly?
Yeah, we were always close anyway, to be honest with you. So we already had a good relationship, and I guess, had somewhat similar personalities. So there wasn't a lot of conflict there. And so, we did a few things early on to make sure that there wouldn't be any tension. One of the things we did is we take the same salary to the penny. That's always been the case, so that we can get that off the table. And so we'll talk about EOS later in the day, but we have, pretty good meeting structure. And again, we agree what we're trying to do at the beginning of the year. We set budgets and forecasts and planning, and then we try to go do it. So we're not pulling in different directions.
You guys it sounds like it's really around alignment, making the same salary, aligned on the same mission together, getting that vision, those goals down on paper, then sort of moving more towards an execution focus. So, it sounds like just getting the alignment done earlier in the process has been a key thing to being able to work together.
Yeah, we spent when we first kind of took over the business, there was a lot of things to fix. So we spent a lot of time together in the field, branch to branch. And once we finally started getting things organized and business processes in place that we thought needed to be updated, then we kind of came together and said, you know what, we love hanging out together, but we have a lot of work to do now, and now we need to go off and do our thing. So, we probably see each other in person not more than a few hours a week, even though we're right all here in Atlanta. He carries an office in a different branch, so that keeps us kind of always our hands in stuff. Egos have never been a problem, and I think that's a big problem in other businesses. And we both, look, it's full-time job, man. We both work 50 hours a week and have done that for 25 years. So nobody's taking a shortcut.
Yeah. Well, I've got a younger brother. We always tried to fight about who was the better athlete. So have you guys figured that out? Better athlete between two of you guys?
I was probably a better athlete younger, but my brother's probably a better athlete now. He's about 5 years younger than me, so I'm kind of getting to that point where the athleticism starts to wane a bit.
You had your years early on. If you're 10, he's 5, right? You could dominate.
That's right.
Maybe not so much to get older. But I didn't know that. That's cool to hear. And we talked to someone, John Adcock came on. He's 5 years into his business and working with a lot of family people. It's cool to see decades later how you've been able to do that. And I would say, again, I don't know a lot, but that doesn't seem like the norm. So I think that's a huge something to be proud of, right? I think it's pretty cool.
Cool. Yeah.
So I want to talk about the first topic here, which is EOS, Entrepreneurial Operating System. We've talked about, you just had this meeting yesterday and it's been core for some of your success. So I guess the first question is like, what is Entrepreneurial Operating System? Never heard of it. Tell me what that is.
Sure. EOS is basically a business operating system. It's just a set of tools and processes that help you really kind of get yourself out of your business a little bit, set parameters and goals, and iterate. So EOS has a number of tools and systems where there's a very specific pattern of weekly meetings, quarterly meetings, and annual meetings. We follow very tight agenda on those. We really are one of the things you really kind of learn in that is, look, you start meetings on time, end on time, stick to your agenda, and people will come to the meetings. Otherwise, they just run off into a tangent. One of the things EOS really did for us, though, it gave us a structure to make decisions. So each quarter we meet and we have a list of things that have come up in the last 90 days that we think probably need to be addressed. And some of the items on the list are left over from the prior meeting. And we'll go through a process throughout the day of analyzing each of these issues. What's the real root cause? Is this something we need to address? What's the priority? When you're in your own business, and we were very guilty of this for a long time, you can get lots of ideas. We're idea people, we're energetic, we like to try new things, and you can just start getting so many plates spinning that you can't keep them all going. And so you have lots of projects that start and stop, and that's a real waste of time. And so EOS really has helped us. We've been on about 6 years, really has helped us say, look, these are going to be the real priorities in the next 90 days. And that's what we're going to do. And if there are obviously major issues that come up in that time frame that are just crisis and need to be addressed, we'll do it. But if it's something else, we don't get distracted by it. It goes on the list. We'll talk about it in 90 days. And if it's a priority, we'll do it the next cycle. So that, I think that's been one of the biggest helps, is our ability to feel comfortable saying no to something and knowing we'll come back to it later. And if we're still interested in it, then we can do it if it still has value. And sometimes you have things on your list 2 or 3 quarter cycles, and then you realize, we don't need to do that. Take it off the list.
Yeah, interesting. Would you say, is this really just around 90-day cycles? Like, are you just like sort of set this goal for the next 90 days and laser focus on that cycle? I know there's like an annual process, right? You want to see where you're going, but like, what type of, I don't know what type of longevity or viewpoint are you looking at? Is it really just around like executing on that quarter?
Well, each year we'll do an annual meeting, which is sometimes even a 2-day. First of all quarterly and annual meetings are off-site. Okay. Laptops go away, cell phones get set down, we work off whiteboards and we take our notes. And so we just try to focus. So once a year, we're going to do an annual planning meeting and we're going to update our 5-year plan. Okay. And so we're going to say to ourselves, is this still relevant? Let's roll one more year. Where do we want to be there? What's 3 years look like? And then what does this coming up year look like? What are our specific goals? Not just revenue often. I mean, these can be goals that revolve around people training, technology implementation, efficiencies. I mean, everybody wants to grow their business and revenue and whatnot, but in the rental business, how well you run your business has a lot to do with how often people come back to you, which is really where you're getting your business from. So when we set annual planning, it isn't just revenue numbers or profit numbers. It's one of the biggest goals we need to do this year. And then from there, we set quarterly cycles of what's important. What do we need to do that's holding us back from reaching these goals by the end of the year? And so we have, that gives us 1, 2, 3 quarters to come back together and say, hey, are we heading towards our goal? And if not, what is it that's holding us back? And then we get that we each take somewhere in the range of 4 projects a quarter that we are specifically focused on in our area of the business. So I generally am doing things like finance and technology. My brother is generally doing just daily operations in the branches. Andy is doing recruitment, training, other aspects of the business. So we each take somewhere around 4 projects, try not to get more than we can do, that are really going to hone us into our annual goal.
I've always heard that startups or smaller companies, they don't starve, they drown. They take on too many things, right? And you have that lack of focus.
Yep.
Can you give me an example of some of the like types of projects you may take on for this quarter? Don't give me the secret sauce here, but like what types of things outside of revenue would be something you guys would consider doing?
Well, some of the things we've done over the years, we understood and kind of came to recognize that the people were the number one product that we had. And so we needed to, first and foremost, develop a system, a network for recruiting, where we really are kind of out in the industry, meeting people, kind of keeping track of names, making sure we had really good setups on the things like Indeed and the other job site boards that were ready to go when we needed them. We're not necessarily running ads all the time, but we have the structure the way we want it. So if we need to find somebody, we now have a system to do it. And then we realized we needed a training program. We use an online platform called Lessonly, and we have built content on that for about 5 years. And so it's really become this central hub that when somebody new comes in the business, our goal was, we need people. If we hire somebody, we can't wait a year for them to understand what we do and be helpful and effective. So as we put together these Lessonly programs, we have programs for people that are new to the company. Here's what we do. Here's how we do it. Here's all the equipment we do. And then we have lots and lots and lots of different training programs in there, how to service equipment, how to write rental contracts, how to do deliveries, blah, blah, blah. So really, that's a lot of work, and it's hard to stay focused on building a training package, which can take a year or 2, really, if you're building out the content while you're running your business. So, one of us took that as a project and stayed with it and figured out what kind of an online platform we could use, because we had spent years building, written procedures and written policies and trying to put them in books. And it just didn't work. But this system really does. And so not only is it a training platform, but it's policy procedure platform. It's documents. Hey, we're doing an annual review on an employee. Here's where you go find the form for that. And so that's an example of the kind of things we've done analysis of technologies and, computer systems that we're on, and do we need to switch, and what are we doing with our delivery fleet, and what do we need to look at there? So the breadth of projects that any company can take on is broad. And this system really has helped us kind of say what's the most important now and get it done, so it doesn't come back in any problem that you've addressed, you have resolved it, and you're not coming back to it constantly.
Yeah, I've for us too, there's not a shortage of new things we can do, right? That's not the problem, right? It's staying focused and disciplined and getting through and finishing things. Like, we don't need any more launch parties. Let's have some landing parties. Let's finish the project, right? We got a couple questions. One of them was tactical question. What was the name of the training software again? Was it Lessonly? Is that how you spell it?
Lessonly, yep.
Lessonly. And it sounds like you'd recommend that just for procedures, training.
It's been great for us. Very easy to use. We have several people in the company that, know how to post new lessons on it. And so it doesn't necessarily have to be me or my brother or Andy. We can use some of our office staff and other people to help build the content. It's really user friendly, and you can build like coursework. So let's say you're going to do seasonal training and you want certain service techs to work their way through 6, 7, 8 different learning cycles. Hey, this is how you do this equipment, this equipment, this equipment. And then, keeps track of it, tells you who did the work, tells you who is late doing a lesson.
And you guys built all that yourself from the ground up?
Yeah, the platform is there to help you load your employees in. It's very easy, build your content, and then from there you can build your training sessions and all that. So
Could have a future business there. I'm sure a lot of rental companies would love some of that
They should
training
use it.
material.
It's great. Well,
Um,
not ours.
yeah, exactly. A couple more questions. One's around buy-in. Did you have any issues go back 6 years ago, maybe even today, like getting buy-in from your team to start using the entrepreneurial operating system?
That's a great question. I ran across it just through business network conversations and met a facilitator who was somebody that comes in and they spend about 2 years with you once a quarter, meeting with your team in these offsite meetings, teaching you the processes that the platform really kind of teaches you. And so myself and my brother and Andy really recognized pretty early on, like, okay, this is a pretty good system. However, we spent at least a year running the business and learning to run the business using that system without ever saying the name around anybody else in the company. We started holding the weekly meetings that we said we were going to hold, and we hold the quarterly meetings. And then as things in those meetings come up that we need to develop, the employees didn't know that we decided to do the time clock module in our rental software because we saw a problem with tracking hours, and they didn't know that that's how that came up. Now, over the years from there, yes, we purposely expanded it. In fact, we've had all of our managers read the EOS book. We've taught them what we do. And so the company understands now that that's a system. And in fact, one of the trainings that we run about once a year here in the conference room behind me is we bring in half a dozen employees and we say, hey, let's show you what this is. If you're new to the company, you don't really understand what people are talking about when they say EOS. So we did not open it up right away because we did want to make sure, again, that it stuck, right? You don't want to come out and say, hey, this is how we're going to run the company. And then 6 months later go, it didn't really work. Once we knew it was sticking, we brought everybody else in.
It's an interesting like change management tactic. Like you sort of lived it, did it yourself. Let's see if it works. And over time, it just becomes the norm. And then you start bringing more people in rather than saying, hey guys, we're going to do this new thing. And if it works, it doesn't work, you sort of lose credibility, right? And you get pushed back. You sort of just over time gradually brought things into the company.
100%. I mean, if you bring in a big project like that and then you abandon it 6 months later, your credibility is shot.
What has been the biggest? I mean, that sounds great. Also sounds like a lot of work, right? Like what's changed for you guys? Like 6 years, like why does this matter? If I'm a rental owner, like why should I take on a system like this? Like what does that mean for my bottom line, for the team? Like what are the benefits you've seen from the system?
Well, first of all, it gives you a cadence that is recognizable, that employees and that work for the company start to feel and understand. It gives you some discipline. I mean, look, like I said, when you're an entrepreneurial kind of person, I mean, you're just running all the time. And honestly, unless you've got an administrative assistant that's really keeping your schedule nice and tight, which most of us don't have, and I don't, it's easy to, we'll get to that meeting later, we'll do that one later. Then you have these meetings that really don't have an end goal. What are we trying to get out of this hour and a half that we're about to spend together? And so it really has given us, again, as people who like to run and do a lot of different things, it's given us a cadence to run the business in a very kind of organized way. And I tell people all the time, I said a minute ago, I mean, one of the biggest things that lets us do is say no to a project. That project isn't going to go away. We have a system to keep track. Hey, and I just did it this morning, updated our documentation for it. And there's a bunch of stuff on the list from yesterday that we said, well, we don't have time to get to that this quarter, and it's not the most important, but it'll be there. And next quarter we meet, we'll go back down that list again, and there'll be other stuff on the list that we've added since then. So it's just really a nice cadence, and it's something that's predictable. And it has really allowed us to, like I said, develop our employees, build these training systems, really given us, it gives us a place to come together and just really reinforce. Like one of the things that came out of it wasn't a project, but we just came to recognize we don't want to hire the wrong people. It's just not worth it. And so we'll wait. We'll be very, very patient. And, and with this cadence, we have a way that, all right, well, we have an opening here. So for the next 3 months, we're all going to have to shuffle and figure it out. But it certainly has helped us drive revenue. It's helped us build our fleet in a very, systematic way. I mean, one of the projects that has been taken in the past is, hey, we need to lay out a 4 or 5 year fleet rotation plan. Like, what are we going to do? We can't go every year into the ARA show and just buy what we want to buy. What's the plan?
Yeah.
And so things like that, really longer term thinking comes out of it when you can focus on just a few things at a time.
Yeah. And you're not just getting the credit card out and swiping, buying whatever you want.
I mean, can't run a business 6 months at a time or a year at a time.
Yeah. Well, and I think I like even the framing entrepreneurial operating system. If you're an entrepreneur, you're going to want to go create things, do like that type of person actually needs the reins, not to stick. They need to slow down and they need to focus. Right. And I know I do. And I mean, it sounds like, like that, if your biggest strength is you can create stuff from nothing, which entrepreneurs do, that's also your biggest weakness, and you got to be able to focus. Right. So I'm asking a lot of these questions on EOS because we use the process ourselves too. And it's been awesome. And it's been pretty popular in the rental industry. I've heard the bottom line equipment, I think in Louisiana, I heard him talk about it. So it's just a really around for me. I've seen it's just around the structure. Now we know like there's a big topic coming up. I don't need to send off a bunch of emails. We know we have the next quarterly meeting in 3 weeks. Let's put it on the agenda, right? And it gives you more frameworks, right. And then it gives you more space to really focus, right? And then you can focus on running the business. And then when you have those meetings, then you can take your step back.
Well, and when each person walks away from a quarterly meeting with 3 or 4 deliverables, there's an accountability now. I mean, it's on paper. We have written it down. We all have a copy of the document. Mine's literally right here from yesterday. So we're all reviewing it every week at our weekly meetings. We review how we doing. Are we on track to get to our goals this quarter? So, it's easy when it's your own business and you don't have investors and you're not really reporting back to anybody. I didn't quite get that project done. You can't do that here. We've all sat around and said, I'm going to do it. And you have an accountability to each other. So,
and there's something about writing it down, putting your name next to it and saying, I'm the guy for it, right? There's power in that. Well, I want to move to the next topic. We could talk about EOS all day. Sounds like it's been a game changer for you. It's for me. So, I mean, the last thing on that, any one book, or if someone wants to get started, dip their toe into this, do you have any book recommendations or anything?
It's been a while since I've read them, but there is an EOS website and they have their primary list of 4 or 5 of their books. And sorry, I don't remember the names of them off the top of my head because it's been a minute, but on their website, they've got the first couple that they're going to have everybody read through. And I will tell you one that I do remember, and it wasn't part of the EOS training, but it was part of the reading process. It's a book called The E-Myth. And you may or may not have heard of it, but the E-Myth talks about a lot of people get into business because they're good at something, but they're not actually good at business. Okay. And so how do you get around that? And how do you identify what your skills are? And then what other skills you need to hire in to complement yours and to fill in the gaps that you don't have? So that kind of thinking is brought to the table with EOS in a way that, you might not think about it on your own.
I think I read that book maybe 10 years ago, if I remember. They used the McDonald's case study where the guy was like, founder of McDonald's, great at hamburgers, et cetera. But like what they've sort of done was simplify, process. That's allowed them to scale, right? I think that was sort of what came out of that book.
Part of it.
So I want to talk about a topic that near dear to my heart, but technology adoption as a small equipment rental business. So one of the things we've talked about is not getting distracted by the shiny object, which is sort of what we just talked about with EOS. So I'm interested in your perspective. Like, you've been doing this for decades and decades. You've also talked to me about how important focus is. Tell me about how technology fits into your rental business.
Well, I mean, I guess there may be a few things. First of all, on a personal level, I love technology. I always have since I was a kid. I'm always going to get the latest phone. I'm always going to get the gadgets. That doesn't work great in the business because you can waste a lot of money and resources on things that really aren't valuable. One of the things, though, that we also recognized many years ago that was a challenge and was going to continue to be more and more of a challenge is that our competitors, particularly the bigger ones, are going to be continuously more advanced on technological platforms and are going to have resources that we don't have to kind of keep up with that. So we knew, all the time we need to be thinking, how do I get to the next, what's the next best step for us? And then how do we get there? And it goes all the way back to when websites first started coming out and how are we going to get a web presence? And then we've iterated that many, many times over the years. So we give you some examples, GPS, very common technology now. We looked at that for, a number of years before we decided, because we didn't see a cohesion in a lot of the platforms. There just wasn't. It was just an industry and a technology that was starting to come together. It was expensive to get into. The GPS units were pretty pricey when the whole concept first started coming out. So we waited and we just kept an eye on the industry. And finally, about 3.5 years ago, we saw, okay, the hardware has now come down in price that we can actually outfit our whole fleet with it. The online interfaces that the different providers have really do work, and they're clean and they're relatively simple. And so we went and we just started running, and we decided, hey, we're going to put it in our fleet. And so we spent several quarters rolling it out, getting it into all the right machinery, getting it attached into our rental software. And it's been a game changer. It has paid for itself many, many, many times over. But if we had taken a false step at the beginning, we could have dropped $20,000, $30,000, $40,000 on hardware that ended up 2 or 3 years later not really being what we needed.
It sounds like you've taken more of a thoughtful approach, not, oh, shiny object, let me go buy it, maybe your phone, but for the business, you've sort of watched things evolve over quarters and years. Have you, I think that's the right approach, right, of minimizing mistakes. Have you felt like you've ever been late to the game by taking that approach? Like, if you missed technology adoption, and that, I'm not saying you have, but I'm just curious, like the other side of that is you could be late on technology. Have you seen that happen for you guys?
I don't think we've put in some things that we could have done earlier, and we probably should have. Give you an example. This year, we finally implemented iPads at each of our rental counters that the rental contracts are delivered to through a DocuSign system. They're signed. It's all, very nice and clear,
right?
Because you spend years signing paper, and it goes to the office and it gets filed. And we did get away from that. We were able to capture signatures electronically, but the system was messy. And we could have probably done this a couple of years ago with the same system we went with. And we didn't. So, on the flip side, we did have some technologies that we weren't using. So the rental software we use had the ability to send out links remotely. So if you're making a delivery to somebody, you can send it to them. They can sign for it ahead of time. They can pay through the payment link. And even though we had that module, we didn't really use it until COVID hit. I kind of went, wait, I think we actually already had that. Okay, yeah. All right, now let's use it. So yeah, there's been times when we could have moved a little faster, but I don't think, honestly, there's much at this moment. I will say, and I don't want to get into vendors, but your software vendors matter because they're kind of the underlying, everything going through your rental system. Right? Yeah. Okay, so your GPS got to connect to it. Your signature systems have to connect to it. Your website's got to connect to it. And so, sometimes you're waiting on them to make something available to you.
Right. Yeah. That core foundation of the source of the record, source of truth, right, matters. We actually have a question from someone. I'm a small rental shop without any real technology. What's the first piece of tech I should invest in? And I'm just going to make an assumption. Maybe let's just assume, we've seen some smaller companies who they don't have a website. They're just getting started. They don't have rental software. They don't have GPS. They don't have anything. Like, assuming you got sort of running out of the garage, maybe 30, 50 pieces of equipment, and they got a small yard. Like, what would you advise, like, first thing, second thing, third thing, to start investing on the technology side?
I don't think you can competitively run a rental business today without a pretty good rental software. Okay, you've got to have a system that has all of your assets tracked, knows what they cost, has your customer database that you can build over time. That you have to have that. You have to know what equipment is making you money, what equipment isn't making you money. You have to be able to schedule it. You have to be able to know when it's coming and when it's going. That's just basic functionality. It's basically moving a lot of what you kind of know in your head or you're doing on a whiteboard just into a tech. It doesn't have to be complicated, but you really have got to have at your fingertips, what did this piece of equipment cost? How old is it? Am I making money off it? What's it cost me to repair? That's just the basic fundamentals of the rental business. And then from there, once you have that, you, I guess the way we've learned it is certain things have come up we needed to do. We needed the GPS, we need the electronic signatures, okay, but we didn't need all that on day one. Now, depends, I guess, on your market. I don't understand how it's possible to run any business today without a website. And so that can be something as simple as, you get some kid out of school to do a 3-page website for you. It gives you your address, shows some of your products. Here's how you contact us. Ultimately, where we're in Atlanta, so it's very, very competitive. And so ultimately, and we're not there yet, we've got to be able to provide full functionality for our customers to place their rental, pay for their rental, sign for their rental. It's all got to be online because, my generation, can still deal with picking up a phone and making a phone call, but that's going away. I mean, that is simply going away.
Yeah, well, I apologize on behalf of all millennials for that. I mean, that's how I got started quickly. I tried to rent something online from a group, and it wasn't great. And that's sort of how people want to operate, right? What do you think about like the next 3 to 5 years of technology trends? Like, what are some of the things you've been following but haven't been able to commit to, like in terms of other technologies you could adopt into your business?
What are we looking at now? That's a good question. For us personally, we're probably more focused on continuing to try to update our website and get it to where I need it to be. That would be our number one priority, and it's been much more of a challenge than I expected it to be. You hear a lot about AI. I don't know what it's going to do for us, but I do think there's a really, really good place for, and some of the vendors are starting to come out with it now. Some already have it. The big guys already have it, which is rental rate predictive software that's really in real time understanding, what fleet is available right now that maybe you'd like to move, what fleet is moving way too fast, you need to raise your rate on it, and can actually do those things in a real time manner. I mean, if you think about, we're no different than an airline. Right? I mean, the airline rents every single seat for a different price to every single person. Okay, may drive you crazy, but they're maximizing revenue, and we're no different. I've got 25 skid steers. Those things are worth different amounts of money to different people for different times, and for us today, it would be very difficult to sit there by hand and kind of make all those adjustments all the time. But I do think the vendors are building more and more sophisticated technology to allow the system to basically, if nothing else, tell you, hey, these are green, they look good, these are red, need lower price, raise price, mess around with the length of the rates. So I don't know that that's going to be something we're in a year, but I don't see how it's possible to not have it in a 5-year frame.
Yeah. So like dynamic pricing. I mean, I've thought about that a lot. I mean, you have fixed supply relatively and fluctuating demand. If you know that you're going to have, I mean, it's what hotels, airlines, I worked at Uber, they all do that, right? And it sort of makes sense. And I think that you could do a rules-based system, which fine, it works okay. But I think with some of the AI stuff that's come out, like I think that is a year, maybe, but 5 years. Like I think there's a lot of changes that are going to happen in rental software using AI. And even I talked to Josh Nickel this morning. I think Josh, another Atlanta person. He said that Tony Kanat, CEO of the ARA, Josh Nickel, then we actually put an article as well for this month's ARA issue. There's 3 articles about AI, and I think there's a lot of interest. I think the proof will be in the pudding, right? Let's see what happens. But like using AI for dynamic pricing, there's a lot of different options here. And I don't think we know where it's going to end up, but I've seen it in other industries, and there's just, I don't know if you've used ChatGPT. I use it almost every day, right? It's very powerful. It's almost like, in my mind, you go back to the advent of the internet and then e-commerce and the app store, right? There's these some fundamental changes that feels like AI is a big shift. And I think no one really knows the use case yet, but I think there will be use cases within the rental industry, particularly through the rental software companies.
Well, that's when I talk about, I like the technology personally, so I'm messing around with all that stuff. And it helps me just keep an eye on it. So when that shows up in the rental industry as a wave in a few years, I'm going to understand it already. And I think it's really important. If you're running a business today, particularly in a big market, I hope you like technology on a fundamental level, because it's just going to continue to push forward. And if you do, and if you stay abreast of it, it's not so frightening when it shows up. But at the same time, I don't, I talk about dynamic pricing as an example, right? But the rental business works best as a relationship business for small companies.
Yeah.
And there's nothing about any of that technology that would prevent me from Kyle holding an agreed upon rate to you for this year for this product. Okay. I mean, no reason I can't do both. Okay.
And I think the when people hear dynamic pricing, they immediately go, "Oh, Uber surge priced me 3x on New Year's Eve," and like it's all about jacking prices up. And it's like, well, sometimes, but it's really around increasing utilization. So what about a Tuesday and someone needs some homeowner piece of equipment, lowering the prices, so it's actually can be better for customers. And I've read a lot about some of the different techniques, but Harvard Business Review had a whole publication around dynamic pricing in different industries. What they found was typically get like a 5 to 10% increase in revenue just by pricing more dynamically. And I don't know what the number is, but I think it ultimately drives more revenue for the rental company if it's done well. But I think for the consumer and the contractor, it gives them flexibility too, right? Because if they have flexibility of when they can rent things, it's good for them, and potentially lowering prices when things are slower, when you have less demand, you have more inventory of a certain item. So I've heard this I've only been working in rental for 3 years, but people have talked about it. No one's done it yet. No one's done it really well. And I don't think what you're saying, you don't need to be the first mover on this, but I think sort of monitoring and seeing what happens, and the nationals may drive a lot of this. We'll see, but it does seem like sort of an obvious next step at some point in the next 5
And I
years.
don't think it has to be like Uber. I mean, Uber is renting you a seat in a car. Okay. And they don't know you. And the person whose car you're in, you probably have never been in their car before. So there's no relationship going on there. And you need their product that they're offering, their seat in that car for 15 minutes, 20 minutes. Okay. And so does everybody else, because it's New Year's Eve. And so there's an understanding about why Uber pricing changes very rapidly, that you don't have to do that in the rental business. But what you just brought up is important. It's fall, right? We will be out of aerators this weekend. They're going to all rent. Okay. But there's some sitting in the shop right now because it's the middle of the week and people are at work. Well, maybe if they got on our website and looked up rental rates and recognized, hey, if I pop out of work a little bit early on a Wednesday, I've just saved myself 30%. And that's a consistency, right? It doesn't change all the time. And then, of course, you've got to have a way, and this is where I think your website and your technology comes in, that if a contractor is coming to you and say, hey, I'm putting a bid together for a job, I think it's going to start at the end of the month. You got to have a way to lock that in for him. You can't show up later. He's already priced out his bid. Your price went up by 20%. You're going to lose a customer immediately.
Yeah, and I think like you said earlier, like there are certain relationships you have. You're not going to dynamically price everyone. They have a negotiated rate, a grandfathered rate. You want to keep them a certain way. It's not a binary thing where everyone's dynamically priced, but there are certain use cases, right? And I think like as you use your adoption of EOS, you just slowly started getting into it. And 6 years later, it's the norm, right? So I think that's probably how it will happen. And I'm interested to see personally if the nationals will do this or if it'll be some of the smaller players, because I think what's happened with AI has become way more accessible. I know people who've started companies in the trucking space using AI, and you can sort of stand these companies up on the software side very quickly, where 5 years ago you had to be Google or Microsoft to do AI, right?
Well, I mean, rest assured, the large national companies, publicly traded, are already dynamically pricing. Okay, but they're also taking it to a different level than what independents are, because they have a national fleet. They're not just dynamically pricing to this market; they're dynamically pricing their entire fleet to the entire nation, and then from there, the system is going to tell them you need more of these in Texas because we're getting better money for them. And so they're already doing that for sure. And even look, I don't want to bring up names, but if you poke around on certain websites of companies that have a lot of outlets around here, you're going to find out that every one of them has a different price on the same product.
You're saying the nationals are already doing it. Are you aware of any like the small, medium-sized companies doing this yet?
No.
And do you feel like for you, for example, do you feel like you're at a disadvantage not being able to do it, or do you think they haven't really cracked the code yet where it's a huge separator for them?
It's not a huge disadvantage to us right now, but to your point a minute ago, if we had the tool today, could we tweak our revenue to the positive.
Yeah.
And our utilization. Again, aerators will all be out over the weekend and they're going to be sitting here during the week, right? There's a lot of time utilization just sitting there. And that's where we can gain from it.
Yeah. Well, I need an aerator this weekend, but maybe I can get a special deal if I come tomorrow.
Give you a call.
5 minutes from you. I need to give you a call. We got to get a dynamically priced rate.
That's right. I'll give you the call.
There you go. I want to move. We can probably talk about technology for a long time. Third topic here is people, right? I think you alluded to this earlier, but I want to talk about the importance of training, but also why it's important to miss on bad hires and how you've waited sometimes months, maybe years with open roles to avoid making some of the bad hires. So, and the other thing I want to bring up is earlier you said sort of like, I think you said something around like people are your best product type of thing. So I guess my first question is like, how important are people into building a successful rental business for you guys?
If you think about a rental of any piece of equipment at any rental branch, there's probably at least 5 different people who have been a part of making that work, right? Somebody serviced the piece of equipment and serviced it correctly. Somebody repaired it the last time and got the repair corrected. It's back in service. You've got a delivery driver who is going to be probably front and face with some of your bigger customers because he's the one bringing it to them. You've got a rental coordinator or manager who's actually taking the phone call, taking the electronic order, getting it processed, getting it right. The last thing you want to do is send a delivery out and the delivery driver has to come back because he got the wrong bucket or somebody just didn't pay attention to detail. So the rental business takes a lot of people to make one rental go out, and there's a lot of details. I mean, there just are. If you're in the party rental business, don't even get me started on that. I mean, that's thousands and thousands of pieces. I mean, I've been there before but so it's a teamwork. I mean, it really in this business is a teamwork. And so it's really important that all those guys at that branch, and really like for us, we move equipment around the city all the time to branch to branch. And so we really want everybody that works for us to have a really solid trust. It's one of our core values in the other teammates. And man, once you start to really get that, if somebody comes in who isn't a fit for that, for your culture, going to stick out very, very quickly. So you might not notice it if you're not really hiring very clearly to your core values to make sure that the people you bring in reflective of what we think is important. And that means as we do that, and we do that over the course of years, the team that is in place is reflective of what we think is important. And once you start to get that cohesion amongst your employees, it becomes very obvious when you have a bad hire very quickly. It doesn't fit the group, okay? And so we're just very, very careful in the process. Very first thing we start with is our core values and just what's important to us, and just trying to read the person and see if we're getting that from them. Obviously, we look for certain skills and certain positions and certain personality types. But once we started to adhere to that, we ended up really developing a team that's very, very tight. I mean, we use Slack as an internal communication tool, and I can see how well we're working together when I'm watching on my Slack.
Yeah.
The back and forth. And one branch is, hey, somebody returned this for you here. Okay, thanks a lot. Hey, I just put a reservation in at your branch for next Wednesday. Okay, thank you. Got it. Hey, can you pick this up for me? Yeah, our truck's that way. I'll get it. It's huge, but your employees the team has to feel good about each other, which means you've got to be hiring to the culture.
So, I mean, it sounds like you don't just need to go hire a bunch of LeBron James all-stars, but people who fit, right? It's about fit. What are your core values that you guys assess people on or assess interviews on?
So our core values: be straightforward, solve problems, simplify wherever you can, be reliable. Then our favorite one is have an attitude. And when we say have an attitude, and I really preach this, I want our employees to be able to be themselves. That makes you happy at work. Okay. I want our employees to show their personalities and feel comfortable doing that with the customers and with each other. Obviously, we're a professional place. Obviously, we have ultimate respect for the customer, and we're going to be professional about things. But look, if you love football, chat about football, man. Maybe this guy over here, plays golf or is a woodworker. I mean, it's okay. It's okay to be yourself. That adds a level of personality. We don't have phone scripts.
Hmm.
We don't. I don't. If I'm hiring somebody with a good attitude and fits our values, I feel I can be comfortable that guy can be himself, that girl can be herself, and let their personality show. But as we work through our core values, I think of them as both internal and external. Like, for instance, one of ours is be straightforward. So really, really drive, just tell the customer what's really happening. Be straightforward with that customer, okay? If you're going to be late, just own it, okay? Don't try to hide behind it. Just be straightforward about it. If this machine isn't going to work for what they're doing, just be straightforward. But it's also inward. Be straightforward with your other employees, with your other, team members. Just be honest. And if we'll do that, it makes it a lot easier. So
Hmm.
that's how we think. And if I hire to that set first and you get through that gate, now we can start talking about, all right, well, what are your skill sets? What are you really bringing in here? What have you done in the past and all that?
I like that. The last one, have an attitude, because don't have bad attitude. It's
Well, we don't put it on the paper, but we say, but make it the good one,
Yeah. Well, I mean, you read all these studies around how people are, when they're authentic and they're fully themselves, happier, more engaged, better results. And it's just, yeah, the results and revenue, whatever. But like, it's just, you want to build an environment where people can have fun and be who they are. They don't need to put on a mask. Everyone's wearing masks all the time, but if you can be yourself, and no one fully can all the time, at least I can't, but it just creates more trust, more authenticity. And as you, especially for your business, as you're trying to compete with United, Sunbelt, Home Depot, who've got dynamic pricing and all this stuff, like, well, you've got a great service and great people, right? And that'll keep people coming back to you. And what you were saying earlier, it's not about the first rental necessarily, it's about the repeat rentals, right? And if you have that trust, that relationship, that goes a long way in the rental industry.
In the rental business, regardless of size, but certainly in the smaller, more independent local rental businesses, it is really relationship driven. It's about customer comfort and really trusting that they know who they're renting from, and that person has their back. And so when a customer walks in and I watch my branch manager ask him how his son's baseball game went last week, they know each other. Okay, there's a trust level there. My brother has always said, when you've got trust in the customer when they quit asking their price.
I like that. And then, like, yeah, I mean, and you don't want to be the low cost leader. That's kind of a fool's errand for everyone, right?
Race to the bottom.
And I like your first one, like, be straightforward. Like, what I've heard from some of our advisors is, like, people don't, then they ask you, like, for us, like, when is XYZ feature coming out? They actually don't care when it's coming out. What customers care about is, are you going to deliver whatever the date was? So if it's going to be January, just say it's going to be January. Don't try to lie and say it's going to be December and miss it by a month. Like, people just want to know what the deal is. And okay, it's January. Great. We can deal with that. We can adapt to it. You erode trust if you continuously aren't straightforward, and then you're not perfect. Things will happen. But I think customers over the long run, which is what you've done, you've been doing this for, the company's been around, what, 70 years, right? Like, that's how you've been able to survive, is that trust, it sounds like.
Yeah, I mean, it's huge. I mean, in our business, your software business, I mean, hey, I cannot do that today, but I can do it for you tomorrow, and I'll be first thing on my list. Okay, I'm not that. It's when you start playing games with people. Oh yeah, I got that. Yeah, I'll be there at 8 in the morning, and it's 1 o'clock in the afternoon. That you've just ruined it. But if you say, hey man, I'm booked in the morning, but I get it there for you by 1, now he can plan his day, and he might say, hey, just drop it off at the end of the day, and then I'll do my job the next day. Lets them plan. So I mean, honestly, it's important.
We got a question from someone just around any learnings from hiring based on values that you could pass on to others in the rental space. So maybe just going back to your hiring process around how you really focus on values, any lessons or things you would share on that?
Well, I'll tell you one thing. We are, most companies will say they have a 90-day introductory period, and then you'll be reviewed at 90 days. We are maniacal about that. And I am adamant that our managers are very clear on their hire. We're going to sit down in 90 days. And if you're not a fit, okay, if this isn't working, I'm not mad at you, you're not mad at me, but we're going to go on and we're going to go separate ways. Because you can't look, we've had bad hires, even if everything we do for it, we'll sometimes bring somebody in, 3 weeks later, 4 weeks later, they fall out on us. Okay, it happens. You can't know everything. But what I really am adamant with my branch managers about is, if that person is still on your staff at day 91, then you own him. You've decided that guy's a fit. Okay. And now, if that person is causing problems in your branch, is not delivering to the customer, isn't following our values, the conversation between me and the branch manager, not between me and the employee. So that's one of the things that we're really, and again, we're very open about that with people. At the 90-day mark, we're going to have a conversation, and if it's not working, I'm not mad at you. We're just going to go on down the road. You do not want somebody in the business, especially when you're a small business, that they're just not pulling their weight, but man, they've been here for 3 years, so we really can't do anything about that guy. You don't want to get in that corner.
It sounds like just being really disciplined around setting expectations, or like, hey, welcome to the team. Really pumped to have you here. We're going to be a high performance company. It's part of that, right? We're going to set up a meeting right now on day 90 to assess if this is a fit, and setting that expectation up front.
And here's what I'm going to, and basically, here's what I'm going to be looking at. I mean, are you a match for our values? And then here's the things we're going to judge. And did you bring the skills to the table you said you did? Again, if you didn't, I'm not mad at you, but it's just not a fit. But once you do that and you iterate that, and it can take a couple of years sometimes to kind of get through all the positions and the people, you end up with a lot longer term employee base that's with you and is committed to the company. You end up at a place that you like to come to work and you don't have problems. Okay. And in the rental business, like probably most businesses, but rental business, a lot of details. I mean, the longer you're in it, the better you are at it. And so you become a much more powerful company when you have a whole set that are really together, are a good fit, and have been there with you for a while.
So it sounds like longevity of your team and the fit of the team has been critical for you. I mean, there's a viewpoint that actually it's better to hire less people, but more high performing people, pay them more, right? Have you taken that approach where you're sort of like, we don't need 1,000 employees, but like, let's have less people, really great people with a high bar that fit together well, and that small team can outperform a larger sort of mediocre team? Is that sort of?
Yeah, I mean, we haven't approached it from that strategy, but we have been willing to pay what it takes for somebody that we really want to get in. We met them, they're a fit. Maybe we've worked with them before. Maybe we know them from the industry. They're available now. We're willing to pay for that. And I think when you do that, and when you really stick to what the personality of your company is and your values, then it's natural you don't need as many people. I mean, and really your team, they don't want people around here just to have an extra body sitting on the dock, on his phone.
Yeah.
I think when you're hiring that way, you automatically end up with probably a leaner team that works better.
And I imagine like the high performers who've been with you for 5-10 years, who've done their job, like they don't want to be around the guy sitting on his phone, right? Like they probably appreciate that high bar, right? And if you don't have that high bar, those types of people may become disengaged themselves.
But that was always Steve Jobs, right? The A players don't want to work with the
C B players, yeah, whatever. Yeah, B players hire C players, right? Type of thing. But the A players will leave if you don't maintain that high bar. I know we have a few minutes here. I want to talk about the last topic, just around knowing your numbers, which is part of the Entrepreneurial Operating System. But particularly for your equipment rental business, what are the top 2 or 3 pieces of data or information that you're looking at a regular basis?
The industry can get really in the weeds with numbers.
Yeah.
If you went to Georgia Tech, maybe you don't mind that, but it's easy to get buried very, very quickly. And there's some numbers that matter to larger companies, things like time utilization, that don't always apply in general rental, certainly in smaller tools and things like that. So on a daily basis, and I mean every day, we look at how much of our fleet is on rent. Okay, what percentage of it is on rent, and how much in original dollars that we paid for it is out. That's what's generating income. Okay, and if it's on the yard, it's not making money. And so we know what that number needs to be, because we've tracked it for years, and I can do the math backwards that says, okay, if this much fleet is out, then this is how my month or my quarter or my year is going to come in. Okay, because there's a very clear correlation between value of fleet out in the field generating money and the money it generates. And so, I mean, I'm not kidding. I track it on a spreadsheet. It's probably goes back to 2011, 2012, every single day. And so I can see the trend, I know the seasonalities. I know when intuitively by looking at that number all the time, I know when we're running slow. I know when we're running hot. I'm just very, very familiar with it. And sometimes with numbers, you got to look at the same number for a long period of time, and then it becomes so intuitive to you that it's speaking back to you. So that's $1 on rent. That's what we call it. In fact, every person in our company gets that email at 8:30 at night.
Is that automated from your rental software? Or you and the Excel sheet, are you taking that from the rental software, or are you manipulating?
Yeah, I'm dragging it from the rental software, so I've got kind of a historical database, and then I can do different things with that. And as a corollary number, we run the exact same number for how much of the fleet is down and not available to rent. Okay, and how long has it been down? That is a key thing for us. And we have a stated goal. It's on our scorecard every week, that the average age of a piece of equipment that's down in our company should be 14 days or less. If it goes down, we expect it to be back within 14 days. Now, some things can be done much quicker, and there are other cases where it takes longer, but that's just a key number we're looking at. So I look at both those numbers every day. What's out there making money, and what can't make me money now, and how do those two numbers balance each other, and what has historically that had an impact on our revenue and other things like that. And then, the very basic one that probably all rental businesses use, and if they don't, they should, is called financial utilization, right? It's just, original revenue divided by original cost. And, how much is this? What is this producing? Is it producing 75% dollar utilization? I mean, I paid $100 for it, and it's banking $75 a year. That would be a 75% dollar utilization, kind of like an ROI number. If you're into the books and stuff like that, it isn't a true ROI because you got to add your depreciation and carrying costs, things like that. But it's a really easy number to look at, and so you can. And when you look at that enough, you start to understand. Like if I have a cutoff saw, I know that things should pay for itself a couple times a year at least, maybe more. If I'm running a skid steer, I'm gonna, if I'm getting 60% on that, I'm not doing too bad, right? But that number, you learn that number, and then once you've gotten familiar with it across your different categories, then when you start doing your 4 and 5 year inventory planning, see where all this is going. Now you can drop that number onto it. You can drop your on rent number onto it, and just a few basic numbers, you start to get a real understanding of what can you make. And I think that's the thing that people, what's the addressable market? Well, in the rental business, addressable market is just how much equipment I can buy, because as independent rental companies, you've got a limit on that, right? So it's important to really understand, hey, I have this much money invested in my fleet, and if it's out this much, it's going to do this return, and that's going to create this much revenue, and now I know what I got to work with under it. So
I love it. I love like the rhythm. I mean, it's to build everything from the beginning, right? You have the annual planning, the quarterly planning, and then the daily numbers you look at, and that routine is giving you a lot of discipline. Well, Jeff, we're actually just out of time here. It's been awesome. Really love talking about the technology piece in general. We could have a whole separate conversation about that, but appreciate you coming on. Final question. Just any specific advice you would give to someone coming new into the rental industry, maybe even yourself 30 years ago, running a one location company, getting started? What piece of advice would you share for them as they sort of navigate entering the rental industry?
Well, I mean, certainly know your numbers, and the 3 I spit out right there are a very easy place to start, but you do need to kind of dig into them. It's very, very important that you have good financials from day one. This is a capital intensive business. You can blow through $1 million wrong very, very fast. And I will tell I've had friends my whole life come up to me because I know I've been self-employed. Hey, I want to start this business. I want to start this business. I want your input on it. And I usually stop them immediately and say, I don't even know what kind of business you're starting. Do you like to solve problems? A lot. Because running your own business is about solving problems all day long. With EOS, you're trying to solve them once and make them go away. But you better like doing puzzles, because that's what running your business is going to be, in a rental business for sure. Because once you send that baby out in the field, you don't know what they're going to do to it.
Keeps it exciting though.
It does.
Well, Jeff, thanks again for coming on. It's been
Thanks for having me,
awesome. Yeah, we'll post this on Spotify and YouTube, and it's been awesome. My takeaway today is I'm gonna go have an attitude.
Kyle.
I like it.